It is June 24th, 2019, and this is Kate Stalker interviewing Margaret Jankowski today. Margaret, thanks for coming in. Why do you want to share your story?
I am really excited to share my story. First of all, I love Monona. I've lived here for a long time, and I think my story is pretty interesting. I've started a project that I would like to share with the community.
That's wonderful. We look forward to hearing about it. But let's start with you. When and where were you born?
I was born in Waukesha, Wisconsin in 1961.
Aha. And you didn't move too far away. Tell me about your parents and grandparents and your family. Were there any influential moments or people in your life?
My grandparents lived in, well, all of my family is pretty much from Wisconsin. My grandparents on my dad's side lived in Kenosha and were educators. My grandma was a math teacher, and my grandpa was a high school principal. And on my mom's side, my grandma stayed home with my mom, and my grandpa worked for American Motors. And my parents, again, I was raised in Waukesha. My mom stayed home with me and was really active in the community. And my dad had a hardware store in Pewaukee.
Oh, wow. Did you work there?
I did work there sometimes in the summer. It was mostly just goofing around and going to the candy store that was in the same little area. So I'm not sure how much help I was, but I thought I was.
But for a young girl, you probably knew more about hardware than half the people coming in.
I think I did, and I actually still am really drawn to hardware stores, to older hardware stores. I really love them. They remind me of my dad.
Oh, that's great. Can you tell me what's a formative personal experience that made you who you are today?
Oh my goodness. One that really comes to mind is when I was in my early 20s. I planned a trip to Greece with my next door neighbor, best friend, Anna, that I had known. I had known her forever. And she and I planned to go to Greece because I wanted to go to Greece. And when it was time to buy our plane tickets, Anna just wasn't able to go. And it didn't even dawn on me not to go anyway. So I went.
Wow.
My first trip abroad was by myself for 3 months in Greece and France and Italy, and just traveling around and meeting people and learning and kind of making do with what I had. I was backpacking.
Wow.
But it really taught me for the first time how to step outside of myself a little bit and look back on my life and kind of evaluate. So it really made a big difference in my life.
That's fantastic. And how did you do with the language?
I did okay. Actually, I had been studying some Greek just out of a little Berlitz book, before I went. So I understood the alphabet and I could pronounce things and I knew some basic words and phrases. So I got along pretty well.
Wow.
People were kind.
That's great. Tell me about any other influential school experiences you might have had.
I think one of my most influential school experiences was in 6th grade. I had gone to just the public elementary school in Waukesha up through 5th grade. But in the summer between 5th and 6th grade, my parents and another set of parents in Waukesha decided to send my friend Caroline and I to a private school in Heartland. And it was called Pinewood. It was the first year of the school, and it was very open. There were 6 grades in the school and 25 kids total. So there were 4 of us who were 6th graders. And everybody learned together, worked together. It was our responsibility to help the younger kids. Every day began with our teacher taking us out in the woods and picking edible plants and learning about the trees. And we took field trips a lot and learned, went to the farm and watched where the wheat was grown and then how it was ground. And then we bought the flour and then we brought it back and we made bread. So it taught me a lot about process and about the world. It was just one year, but it made a huge difference. And I remained in contact with the teacher at that school until she died last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you also learn math and English at this school, or was it all?
We did.
Yeah.
We did. Although I think that my parents probably knew that I was far enough along that if in the basics I didn't get as much that year, that they were okay with that I would catch up. But yeah, parents came in and did those lessons. So there was a parent who was a math teacher, and she came in and did math and, that sort of thing. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So tell me about growing up and throughout your life, family interests or personal hobbies?
Growing up, I had a lot of friends in our neighborhood. We were a very active little neighborhood, and the families were close. My own personal interests, I didn't really recognize it when I was growing up, but sewing was one of them. My mom taught me to sew when I was really young, and I would make easy patchwork quilts and little things for my dolls and stuff like that. So it was an interest, but not until more recently have I really identified that was kind of a thread through my whole childhood. A thread.
Good.
It was.
Good use of that word.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. It kind of led to where you are today.
It did.
When did you come to Monona?
I moved to Monona with our family. That was my ex-husband and my 2 kids. In 1992, we moved in on New Year's Day.
Ooh.
And my daughter was 9 months old. My son was just about 2.
That was not a fun New Year's Eve.
No, it really wasn't. And our house wasn't, it's a very old house, and it was not really ready for us yet. So that was a little rough at first, pretty chilly. But yeah, we moved in. We had been living in Milwaukee, and then because of my husband's job, we'd been moved to Memphis for 2 years, and then he had taken another position in that company, and that brought us back up here. He was actually working in Evansville, and we chose Monona because of the house.
The old house?
Yeah, we found this old house, and I fell in love with it, and we just decided we really didn't know much about Monona at the time. But we liked the neighborhood, and I liked the house. so we
Are you still
we
in
moved
that
in.
house?
I am.
Oh,
yeah.
that's great. So tell me about your family.
My direct family. I have 2 kids. My son Alec is 30. He lives in Australia, in Sydney, and my daughter Maddie lives in Chicago. She's 28, and we are in close touch thanks to technology. My mom is still alive. She's 93 and lives in Oostburg, Wisconsin now.
Great.
Yeah.
How many pets?
Yes, I have a very old dog named Kiri. She's 17. And
That is an old dog.
she is. And my mom always, whenever I bring Kiri to see her, she says, "Oh, you and I, we're just old girls."
Cute. So do you play any sports or do any activities locally?
Most of my activities are pretty independent. I do belong to a yoga studio in Madison, and I bike a lot. I love biking around the lake, and I think that the bike paths in this area are just amazing.
Great. Do you ever have any great stories about stores you like or restaurants you like in Monona?
Well, I love Swad. I was so excited when Swad went in on Monona Drive. It's so yummy. And I love rutabaga. I think we're really lucky to have rutabaga. I've been excited about how the corridor has developed, how Monona Drive has developed. I mean, when we first bought our house, I couldn't find our house. I didn't know this area at all, and I had to drive a certain route or else I couldn't find the house. And that route was always Monona Drive. And so I've been, that drive is very familiar to me. And I really admire how the planning has brought it forward. So it's cool. I love where we live.
Great. Mm-hmm. Did your kids go to school in Monona then?
They did through middle school, and then they went to Edgewood Actually, my daughter did a couple years at Monona Grove, but they finished off their high school at Edgewood. But yeah, they both went to Maywood and Nichols and Winnequa.
Okay. So tell me about your neighborhood. Has it changed?
Well, it has. I live over on Toniawatha, and when we first moved in, there were a lot of kids. There was a really big population of young families, and so we made friends easily, and our kids had friends to run around with, and so it was just awesome. Plus, we live near Arrowhead Park, so the kids could go play down there independently, and it felt safe. And over the years, the population, of course, has aged a little bit, but now it's coming around again, and it's really a treat to walk my little old dog past Arrowhead Park and see new families down there. And it reminds me of when we were raising our kids, and using that park so much and that neighborhood so much. I have to say there are a lot of new houses going up in our neighborhood, which feels really different. There are a lot of really, really big homes going up on the lake. And that's an adjustment, just getting used to it. That neighborhood has always felt to me like taking a walk up north. There are no sidewalks. You walk down, there are lots of trees and big old trees, and it feels, it's just an adjustment to get used to the big old houses, the big new houses going in.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your business. I'm sure people will be fascinated by it, as I am. So give us a rundown of how you started and what inspired you.
I always say that the sewing machine project found me more than I found it. I was inspired way back in 2005, early 2005, by an article I read online about a woman who'd lost her sewing machine in the tsunami in Southeast Asia that happened at the end of 2004. And this article was written by a BBC reporter, and she was traveling with 3 women who were walking back to what had been their village. And she was interviewing each of them and asking what they hoped to find. And one of the women said, "I just hope I find my sewing machine." And my first response was, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'd do without my sewing machine." And then I thought, I would survive without my sewing machine. But for this lady, it was really a question mark. And I had never been so struck by something I'd read, by a situation in my life. I mean, I had always read about, read or seen the news about things that were going on in the world, and felt like, what could I ever possibly do to make any kind of a difference? And all of a sudden, it wasn't a question. I was working at a sewing machine shop on the east side. I was working at Hans Sewing. And so every day I was sitting down with customers and selling them new sewing machines. And often customers would say, "I don't know what I'm going to do with my old sewing machine." And, so I read this article and I thought, this is crazy. This imbalance just doesn't make any sense to me. And I really, when I reflect on it, I didn't think how or where I would get machines or how it would work or where I would get the money. I just thought, no, I think I'll collect sewing machines and start sending them, over to Sri Lanka. Of course, of course I would. So I went on the local news in Madison and talked about this idea, and machines started pouring in. We collected them and took care of them down at Hans Sewing. And within a few weeks, we had 75 working sewing machines. It was amazing. And, another question mark was how, who am I actually going to send these to? I can't just, I think my vision was, I'm just going to put them in a box and put the box on a boat and ship it off, and then there's going to be all these ladies standing on the shore, and they're going to get their machine. And then I thought, okay, but really, how's this really going to go? And just when I would start thinking about how something might work or not work, I would have an answer. So a friend of mine called and said, hey, I heard about what you were thinking. I have this friend who's with the American Hindu Association, and maybe he could help. Turned out they were already sending the relief supplies over there. So he and I collaborated and would sink one machine in a box and surround it with fabric and toys and medical supplies and all the things they needed to send to orphanages over there. And off they went. So, or we wondered how we were going to get the money. I didn't have the money to buy power transformers and pay the shipping costs, which were really high. I didn't know how I would do that. And people would say, well, that must be a stopping point. Then, you don't have any money. You can't do this. And I think, well, it'll work out. And community groups rallied for us. The Girl Scouts here in Monona raised money for what we were doing. The Monona Kiwanis invited me. Monona Optimists invited me to speak and collected money. And even at that point, I didn't have enough money to do what I wanted, to send all these machines. And then my daughter came home from school and said, the student council is raising money for tsunami relief. And I said, oh, really? So I sent some money off with her, and I called the district office here in Monona, and I said, so what are you going to do with that money? And they said, well, we don't know yet. We just think it's really important for the kids to do this. And at that point, I calculated what I needed and, to finish with these 75 machines, and I still needed $2,000. And I thought, I don't have that money. So the Secretary Bev up at the district office said, well, I'll tell them what you're proposing and see how it goes. And she called me back in a few days and said, the committee said, we'll give you whatever we raise. We don't know what it is yet, but we'll give you whatever we raise. And she called back in a few weeks and said, okay, fundraiser's over. We raised $2,015. So it was exactly what we needed. And that sort of thing has happened. It's like I don't really sit there and puzzle over it. I don't know. I guess I just ask for it without even knowing I'm asking for it. And then somehow, and often things aren't answered in a way that I would originally think they should be. So it's taught me to just be a little more open about it, to say, I'm really not sure how this is meant to work. Mm-hmm. And it's surprised me so many times. So it's been really cool. So I started it by doing that. And then Hurricane Katrina hit that same year, 2005. And at that point, we shifted everything down to the Gulf and started taking machines down there. I took truckload after truckload. I would rent a truck.
You drove.
I would drive. I would load it with machines. On our second trip down, I went on the local news in New Orleans, which was still all torn up from Katrina, and I talked about what I was doing. And by the time I got to the church where we were going to do this distribution, there were 300 people lined up down Canal Street, and we had 65 machines in the truck. And by the end of the day, there were 500 people that had come. And after we left, there were more people calling the church and asking how they could get a machine. And so I set up a database. And so on each trip, I would just call the next however many people on the list and go down. So to date, we've taken over 1,000 machines down there, probably more like 12 to 1,400 to New Orleans. But in that time, because we were doing this work and because word was getting out, groups from all over the country have applied for machines, and we've set up a way to an application process, and so we send machines to groups all over the country, some international, but the shipments that we do international, we collaborate with other groups that already have a shipment going. We don't initiate international shipments.
Sewing machines are very heavy.
They're really heavy, yeah. And getting them through, we tried to initiate a few shipments to India and to Guatemala, and they were hung up in customs, and we just didn't have the knowledge really to navigate it yet. Maybe someday, but not right now.
So are the sewing machines still coming in?
They still come in. It's amazing. So individuals, we have a few different collection sites where people can drop off machines. And then people ship them to me from all over the country, which is amazing. And
Do they come to your home?
no, they come to the post office. And the people at the Monona post office were kind of on a first name basis. So they help me load up my car, and we kind of have an understanding. They're very kind to me. And also at the UPS store down at the end of Monona Drive. So both groups have been amazing with helping me out. And then we've had corporate donors too. So, Bernina and Singer and Brother last year donated 500 machines, and Baby Lock. So corporate donors give us machines too, which is super helpful.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think is the future of the sewing machine project? Is it getting bigger and bigger, or is it limited by what you can handle?
It's kind of hard to know, because this whole thing has been so organic that I didn't see 500 machines coming last year, and all of a sudden there they were. So that's a little bit hard to answer. In the organization, I work really hard. I don't necessarily need to go really broad, but I want to go deep. And so I want to make sure that the recipients and the volunteers and the donors and everybody who touches this organization feels nourished by it. I don't need to be the biggest game in town. I don't need to be the only game in town. There's plenty of need out there. So I work towards depth in our relationships and making sure that people feel thanked, and that we are working to really listen to the groups that apply for machines and make sure that we're answering what they really need instead of what we think they need. Mm-hmm. And all of that is there are so many life lessons in it, that it's really astounding. I find that I learn things every day by doing this work, So as far as the future, I have no aspirations to have our own building. We work out of a Sunday school classroom. I would like to someday be able to more successfully ship things internationally and have ways to help the groups that are getting the machines. I mean, if we had endless supplies of money and machines, that might be something we would do. Mm-hmm. But really, we get applications every single month. We sit down as a board, and my board is phenomenal, and go through applications, and we learn together every month by what groups are doing. For instance, like right now, libraries are probably our biggest applicant. Libraries from all over the country that are working to expand themselves as a resource. And so they're offering classes, they're offering tool lending libraries, they're setting up free mending sites like they have at our Monona library. And then as the Sewing Machine Project, we have 3 free mending sites in Madison. So some libraries are doing mending sites. So I'm amazed. I'm amazed at how, first of all, at how much need there is, because I receive a lot of mail and email about groups in need. And then at the same time, how people are answering need, in such a creative way. So it's really astounding.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So how many people are involved with the Sewing Machine Project? You mentioned your board, and you mentioned volunteers.
Yeah, we have a board of 6 right now. And we call ourselves pretty small but mighty. And our volunteer core, on our volunteer list, we have over 100 people, but I'd say our core is probably about 25. And those are people that go out and do mending very regularly at the mending sites, because those operate on a regular every 2-week basis. One of them is every week. And they help in our local classes. And they help me. We have what we call our Machinists Union, and we meet every Monday afternoon and go over the machines that we receive and sew on them and make sure that everything works. it's one of my kind of quality issues that everything on a machine a machine needs to do everything it's designed to do for us to donate to anybody else. And so if it doesn't go.
Then what do you do with it?
Well, it depends. If it's a machine that has a reputation for like really lasting a long time, that we know that the interior is good and the gears aren't going to wear out and stuff, sometimes we'll have it repaired at a local repair shop, and they often do the service for little or no cost for us, which is nice. And if it's a machine that has a reputation for wearing out, a machine from the 60s where the gears wear out, then we part it out. Then we keep what we need, and we actually, so sometimes we recycle it if it's really junky, if it's really just something we can't use. But we also have a guy that drives once a year from Idaho. His name's Elmo from Idaho. And he drives a truck out and he picks up all the machines that we have that don't work. And he goes back and he trains sewing machine technicians in the West, in like little communities where people need jobs. So he trains sewing machine technicians, and they cobble together working machines out of all these machines that don't really work that well. So he's come twice, and he says he's coming again, so we hope so. Yeah, but again, one of those kind of serendipitous meetings that just blows me away.
Do you ever stop and think about the number of people you have employed or helped in the years you've been doing this? How many jobs you've created from people you'll never meet? Right.
Well, and it blows me away too, because early on, when I was down in New Orleans, I was handing machines to people. I was like seeing every single recipient, and people would say, "You have no idea what a difference this machine will make in my life, and how can I thank you?" And I would say, like, being able to do this is like such a gift to me that this is enough for me. But we very early on started asking people to pay it forward in a sewing related way. So use this machine to teach someone else to sew, or make something for somebody else, or share, loan it to somebody, but somehow create a ripple effect with what you're doing. And not only does that, give the work that we do more of an impact, but I really think it's important. What I saw in New Orleans was people just felt so like they had nothing to give, like they were just taking because everything had been taken from them, and so with this pay it forward, I guess the message to me is that everybody has the power to mend their community. Everybody has the power to do something, and it may seem small to the person giving, but it's not. You can impact somebody else's life. So when I think of, I can tell you we've given out over 3,000 machines, and that's impacted this many individuals. But when we talk about all those people paying it forward, it goes way further.
And Elmo,
I know. See, there's even more. Yeah. And like you said, we'll never know, and that's okay.
Right. Right. So do you have a favorite story about the sewing machine project? One particular thing that was most meaningful to you?
One of the stories that I love to tell, and that to me kind of illustrated again this like kind of the serendipitous nature of this, and serendipitous sometimes sounds trite to me, but it really is. It's anyway, I guess that's the best word for this. But I was preparing a shipment of machines to go to New Orleans. I was getting ready. I rented the truck, and I had counted up the number of machines we had to give away. And I would call all the next people on the list. 70 machines. I'd call 70 people, and I would call them. And as time went on, years went by before I got through this whole list. And as time went on, I would like have to remind them, remember that day at the church and the line and the sewing machines and the da 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 da, and they would go, oh yeah, And I'd say, do you still need a machine? And sometimes people would say, oh, yeah, I do. And sometimes they would say, I already got one. Pass it on to somebody else, or, whatever. Or sometimes I wouldn't be able to find people because they'd just moved on. And so I called a woman named Anna in New Orleans, and I went through that whole spiel and said, do you still need a machine? And she said, oh my gosh, I sure do. She said, my fiance and I are fixing up this old house in this kind of rundown neighborhood in New Orleans. It's kind of a rough neighborhood. We're making a community center. And she said, the neighborhood's gotten so bad that people are afraid to come out of their homes, especially the seniors. It's just too dangerous right now. And she said, so we want to create a community spot where kids can come after school and seniors can gather, and we can offer classes, and people can use it as an event space if they want to, or whatever they need. And so she said, we would love a sewing machine. She said, I'd love to have sewing classes there. That would be so cool. And I said, well, okay, great. And she said, do you think we could have 3 machines? And I said, of course, we can make that happen. So we finished our phone call, and about 10 minutes later, she called back and she said, do you think we could have 5 machines? And I said, sure, we can make this happen. So after we'd hung up, I went in the back room at Hans, and I was looking at the wall where I had like shelves of sewing machines ready to go. And I was looking for 5 machines that would work well in a classroom, and, that would have some similarities so they wouldn't be so hard for a teacher to teach on. And that batch of machines just couldn't have been more different. They were, I wasn't even finding 2 that could like coexist in a classroom. I just thought, oh no, how is this going to work? So I kind of, scratched my head and left the room, and I had to leave the store for a couple hours and go have an appointment. And I came back and came in through the front door of the store, which wasn't our usual entrance as employees. We usually came in through the back door. So I come in through the front door of the store, and I walked in, and right inside the front door were 5 sewing machines lined up. And I thought, well, that's weird. Nobody leaves their machines there for service, and it's not our brand, so it's not a machine we sell. And what's the deal? So one of my coworkers was hanging around, and I asked her, and I said, Rebecca, what's with these 5 machines? And she said, oh, you missed this lady. She came in while you were gone, and she's a sewing teacher, and she just took her sewing classroom apart. And these are 5 classroom grade machines, and she's had them all serviced. And they're all, and I looked, and they're all threaded with brightly colored, all beautiful thread, and they're all clean. They're all exactly the same. And I had exactly what I needed. And, it's a moment that at the time, it made me cry. And even now, when I think about it, I just thought, what is this? It was so amazing. And then I was able to take those down to Anna. So it was fantastic. So that's just one of my favorite stories, because it really illustrates kind of this leaning back and opening up and saying, I'm not sure how this is supposed to go, but I'm open to ideas. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, that is a great note to end on, Margaret. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's a beautiful story of you and your business. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.